that was just a practice one. Now I'll have to do the real one here. Welcome to the February 25th meeting of the Placer County Planning Commission. Could you please join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Kathy, roll call, please.
Sure. Mr. Akuri?
Here.
Mr. Seveson's absent. Mr. Gray?
Present.
Mr. Moss?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Nader?
Here.
Mr. Riccucci?
Here. Next item is report from the planning director. EJ, you're up.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the Commission. EJ Valdi with the Planning Services Division. First thing I want to let you know is, if you don't already know, all the mics are on today. There's no off.
Even if the little buttons.
Even if the little button's pushed. So you're all mic'd up. You're live. So
watch what we say.
Say whatever you'd like.
Is that a fair warning?
Let's talk about schedule. We talked about next month possibly going up to Tahoe. Those Tahoe projects, the larger ones like Squaw Valley and Martis Valley West, doesn't look like those final EIRs for those projects are going to be out till the end of April now. So the two projects, and the concern was going up there this time of year, and what are we going to be able to see if we do a tour of those two sites. My understanding is that the Martis Valley site is very difficult to get to. You can't even get in the roads to get in there right now. So it wouldn't be much purpose in going to see that site during this time of year right now. Squaw Valley is a little different, but we're trying to get it so we can, do the least amount of trips up to Tahoe as possible, right? So for March right now, we have only two items. The medical marijuana ordinance, that's going to be coming to you as a introductory item, and then the Winding Creek subdivision. We have two scheduled meetings for March. I'm going to cancel the next one, so we just have you guys come in for the one meeting, and we'll hear both items at the same time.
That's the 10th.
Yeah, so March 10th, we're going to cancel that. That's 2 weeks from now.
Oh, we're going to cancel the 10th.
Cancel it all together. And then on the 24th, we're going to have the meeting here in Auburn, and then we'll do the medical marijuana ordinance and the Winding Creek subdivision. And then for April, there's two meetings there's one on the 14th and one on the 28th. There's an item that is requesting a continuance today. We'll probably be looking at one of those dates for that item, and then we'll revisit, a possible Tahoe trip, which may even be less snow up there and more to see. So that's kind of where we're at right now. That's all I have for schedule, unless there's any questions on that. Our Board of Supervisors on Tuesday, they got an update on the status update on the Placer County Conservation Plan. I don't believe they took any action. I think that was just a status update. Other than that, that's all I have.
Okay, EJ, any questions? Go ahead.
What is the status? I mean, where is it at this point? Just quickly, I mean, you don't need details. But
Good question. I know they were going. The purpose of the status update was the funding and the cost of the program. So I think they wanted to lay out that to the board. They had a lot of the agencies there, the state and federal agencies there to speak. So it was a big conglomerate of everybody who's been involved in the process to date. So I think now it's the focus is on the EIR process, and Jerry looks like he has a lot more information on this.
I don't have a whole lot more, but they hope to have the final PCCP public draft document done within a month or two. So that's kind of the schedule for release of the public draft document. And then the EIR, we hope will be finished up sometime toward the end of this year, spring. We're actually moving along pretty quickly on it now, so it's picking up steam.
how long has this been going on?
It seems like an awful long time. I'd like to point out that Sacramento County has been going through the same process for 15 years, so we're just a little behind them. That's all. Or a little ahead of them.
So probably the next time we come back to this commission probably will be to accept comments on the draft EIR.
No, that's pretty ambitious. Oh, you mean before presenting it to? Oh, yeah.
Well, for the commission, when the draft EIR public
Their
hearings
first action,
again, we
right.
would be back at the planning
Yeah, I
commission.
think it would be.
Late this year. Early next year.
Go ahead.
Let's see, I might mention, if we could, when we go to Tahoe, if we could do it before or after the April 28th, because I'll be gone. I'd like to,
Be along
when we're
that.
looking around up at Tahoe, I'd like to be on that meeting. I'll be gone on the 28th.
Yeah, I'm gonna be going on the 14th.
You will be gone. Okay, and we can also schedule a special trip up there as well, so that's also something we can do.
We've done that periodically, huh?
Yeah. So, then we could schedule around the weather. That would be good.
Excuse me? How many, you have what, 3-day or 24-hour notice? You said it's clear, let's go.
Well, probably need
Post
more
it.
than that.
Whatever the minimum posting time is, especially if it's a look around and not making decision, anyway, we can maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's less than 10 days or not, if we were to do still a 10-day notice. Or we could, 24 hours, so that might be a good suggestion, so,
Okay.
all right, thank
Any
you.
other questions for EJ? Okay, thank you, EJ. Okay, next item is a public comment. The item set apart on every meeting for the public to comment on any item that's not on the agenda today. So are there any comments from the public? We could not make any decisions, but we're welcome to hear your comments on something that's not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. To the consent agenda, and my understanding that there's no items on the consent agenda today, so we'll just move right on. So the timed item is 10:05, we're right on time here. The Auburn Creekside Center Draft Environmental Impact Report, Public Review and Comment. And Jerry will be handling this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. It's on. Welcome to our newest Commissioner, too, our Curry.
Thank you.
Okay, so actually for the benefit of our newest Commissioner, I'll just kind of briefly outline the process here. We're here to take comments, public comments on a draft EIR. The draft EIR is prepared when a proposed project would result in one or more potentially significant impacts to an environmental resource area. And we first send the public draft EIR to the State Clearinghouse to start a public review of the document. That was done on January 15th of 2015. It's a state-mandated 45-day public review and comment period, and it'll end on February 29th. It's customary, as is customary for EIRs, we provide an opportunity for the public meeting in order to discuss the project's environmental impacts and answer any questions and take public comments, and that's why we're here today. Following the close of the public comment period, our EIR consultant, who's here today, will compile comments and provide those responses to those comments, and that'll be included in a final EIR. So the final step would be to return to your commission for action on the entitlement request and also on the final EIR. The draft EIR was also presented to the North Auburn MAC here in this room on January 9th, and at that time we provided the public with information about this hearing and answered a few questions that they had at that time. So we'll get into the project
I might
here.
mention while you're finding your place there that, anybody can, up to that deadline, can submit written comments to I guess, your office.
That's correct, Chairman. Yeah, and I'll have some discussion at the close of this presentation to inform people about their opportunities for public comment. So we sent out what's called a notice of availability to all the people, property owners within 300 feet of the project boundaries. We also notified this draft EIR, the availability of the draft EIR in the Sacramento Bee, to all the people that commented and agencies that commented on the initial notice of preparation. We notified any state and federal agencies, all county staff, all public agencies in the vicinity up here. We have hard copies at the Auburn Library and also here at CDRC. And also we presented this, as I mentioned, to the North Auburn Municipal Advisory Council. So there's been kind of an outpouring of information here to, to see if people could have any interest in the project. So here's the project site. For reference, we're over here. This is Bell Road, running east-west. This is the Target store at the northwest corner of Bell and State Route 49. Project site is immediately north of Target. A portion of the Target driveway actually is either on or adjacent to the property boundaries here So this would be realigned with the project, but this is the project site here. Here's a closer in image to kind of show you some of the features of the project. So there's a riparian corridor that runs from the south to the north. This is a tributary to Rock Creek, which meets up with this tributary a little further north in the aerial image that you see here, and then runs on out to meet up with Dry Creek, becomes part of the Dry Creek watershed. So there's some riparian vegetation associated with that drainage. It actually is captured down here. It transects the target site and comes out in a couple of culverts in this location and then travels north. This is the proposed site plan. The project is a regional shopping center. It would consist of several buildings. They would be connected through a couple of roadways and intersections here. These are access points to each of the different parcels. There'd be 2 or more major tenants at the rear of the property. These tenants up along 49 could include a mix of typical shopping center uses, restaurants, retail, doctor's offices, those sorts of things. Back to that. There's also a parcel map being proposed to subdivide the property into 9 lots. 2 of them would be these open space lots that would remain intact. Project is going to be designed to span this riparian area with a new bridge that's actually an extension of Education Street. It culminates in a new traffic circle over here at Quartz Drive. So as I mentioned, it'd be a 9-lot commercial parcel map, 6 separate buildings with the option of additional tenant space, leased tenant space within several of those buildings. The site plan that shows up here indicates about 85,000 square feet of building area. This building here, which includes a drive-through, could be proposed as a larger building without a drive-through. So what we see here is that we have a potential for up to 90,000 square feet of commercial floor area with a possible drive-through tenant. As I mentioned before, it'd be an extension of Education Street with a bridge over Rock Creek tributary technically, and it would terminate that new traffic circle. About 3.4 acres would be set aside as open space for the creek and riparian habitat. So there will be some limited impacts to the riparian habitat, but they'll be pretty minimal. And there'll be improvements to Rock Creek Road, Quartz Drive, and State Route 49. So here are the impacts that were analyzed in the draft EIR. These are the usual suspects. We go right down through the list and look for any potential impacts to any of these bylaws or any of these resource areas. And where there are impacts, we identify mitigation to reduce those impacts to what we consider to be a less than significant level. Where we cannot find mitigation to reduce those to less than significant level, we're left with significant unavoidable impacts. So all of these were analyzed as chapters within the draft EIR that you have a copy of. Summary of impacts. The project is largely, it's not technically infill, but it's kind of an expansion of the development footprint within the North Auburn area. It's kind of just moving northward. So because they're spanning the creek and reducing or minimizing the impacts to the riparian area, nearly all the potential environmental impacts are less than significant, or can be reduced to less than significant level with mitigation that's being proposed. That we found only 2, the EIR finds only 2 significant unavoidable impacts. One of them is a cumulative traffic impact that you're going to see whenever you add essentially one new trip to State Route 49. It just kind of triggers that. There would be a new a delay at Rock Creek Road, so up here, north of the project site. Right now, this is kind of an unrestricted access. People can come out and, if they feel chancy, can turn left or right. Caltrans would like that to be a right turn only, right in, right out. So that results in a little bit of a delay beyond what motorists currently experience coming into that intersection. So those are the 2 significant and unavoidable impacts that would result from this project if it's constructed as proposed. As I mentioned, we have several opportunities for public and agency input. One of them is here at today's Planning Commission hearing. We also will take comments all the way up to February 29th. Leap year gives us one day more this time around. So the public can submit comments up until that point. Those comments, as I mentioned, will be addressed in a final EIR. Where they result in new mitigation, that'll be discussed in the final EIR. It may result in recirculation of the final EIR. Otherwise, they'll just be discussed in the context of what mitigation has been provided. And then the final step here would be Planning Commission entitlement hearing, so people can show up again before this Planning Commission to discuss the merits of the project, in addition to any environmental impacts that they believe have not been sufficiently addressed in the final EIR. So I can leave this image up there. That's where people can submit comments. It's the address and the email location, and also the website link to obtain access to the EIR. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Any questions?
I'd like to point out real quick also, we have the consultant for the applicant here, John Margowski, and we also have the consultant for the EIR, Nick with Rainey Development. So if you have questions that are more specific, we can maybe get a little help from them.
Commissioners, you have any questions, Jerry, at this time? Okay, thank you, Jerry. Then we'll reserve questions maybe, or maybe after comments, the consultants and the applicant can, unless the applicant is, do we have to have the
Not at this
applicant
point,
time?
unless you have specific questions, we typically
You can
open it up for
ask a
public.
question later on, I guess. Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Okay, and we do have a sign-in sheet up here at the front for anybody who wants to provide comments.
It's this time, anyone in the audience that would like to comment on the EIR, please state your name or write it down here so we can get back to you. And remember, this is on comments on the EIRs. You saw that long list of laundry list. If some of those things maybe you feel weren't properly addressed, you can make those comments, but the project will come back later on to us. I always make my little speech here. Sometimes hard to separate the EIR from the project, but there are other alternatives in there that the EIR does address. So, but anyway, anyone in the audience would like to comment on the EIR at this time? Well, somebody's got to. Last time, no one got up, and I started encouraging people, and we had a whole slew of people come up. But we'll at least have some people come up. Thank you, sir, for being first. Hard to come up sometimes to be first.
I'm Shannon Woodland. I've signed in here.
Okay, you did.
On the bridge that's going to be built, it's not culvert bridge, it's going to be an actual bridge.
That's correct. It'll be a bridge that spans the creek. There are going to be a couple of
Pillars?
supports, yeah, in the middle. Actually, no, just one support, I believe. One support in the middle, and then it'll link on either side.
Okay. Is it going to be high enough for the homeless to sleep under it?
Well, we don't know, but it'll be a bridge, not a culvert, though. It'll be actually have a
Yeah, well,
area
it's a
underneath
bridge,
for the
so there's
river.
going to be
A bridge. isn't it?
somewhere under it, somebody could sleep. Yes. Okay. Now, the area on the map or whatever it was of the 200-foot strip through there. Now, to me, this is a subdivision. I don't know. In the wetlands thing there, now them are separate parcels. Now, are them going to be deeded to the county?
County, are those open space parcels, they become county property, or are they under the control of the developer still?
They remain under the control of the developer.
But the public can go into those areas, though.
It's private property, so there wouldn't be free and clear public access to those to the middle of the property. Not really any pedestrian access there either, although people could climb down in there, I suppose. But they'll remain under the private control of the property owner.
Okay.
Are they going to leave it existing the way it is now?
That's correct. That middle portion there, that whole
With the
riparian area.
blackberries and all the cattails, and they didn't save the beavers from upstream when we had the fire, so they could put the beavers in there too?
So I suppose the beavers could make their way in there. They'd probably be more than welcome.
Yeah, okay, okay. I think that's all I have.
Oh, well, thank you for your comments. Those are
Okay.
good comments.
Now, I want to be notified again,
Yeah, well, if you have your address and everything there, you will be.
right there.
You will be.
Yeah, because I read in here that you only notify 300 feet. Yeah, I think it used to be 600 feet.
Yeah, we'll make sure since your name is on there, you'll get notice of any hearing
Of a
notice for
hearing.
this project.
Yeah, because I'm downstream from this,
Okay, good enough.
upstream. So, all right,
Thank you, sir. Yeah, yes, ma'am. You sign in, or you will sign in?
I didn't sign in, but I will.
Okay.
I'm Victoria Connolly. I live in Auburn. I basically have no real issues with this project, but more some comments and questions. I would note that the number of trips per day, even though there's only like 300 and something parking spaces, it's estimated to be 4,400 trips a day, which is, of course, 2,200 cars because you're going and coming. I would point out that that's about 2/3 the size of the supercenter, with the reduced trips there of 6,600 trips a day. So I don't know what they're going to put in those 8 buildings, but, is it mini IKEA or, what's drawing that kind of a number of trips per day? Also, the traffic mitigations, I get that there's Rock Creek going to be impacted. There was mention in the report about at some point in near or distant future, and I'm just asking if we could get clarification on that, of a feeder road from Dry Creek down towards the project. And I was just wondering when that might happen, because Dry Creek was showing significant impact at certain times of the day, but I guess it's reduced ultimately to a D level of service, which is acceptable. I may be mistaken on that, but that's my recollection. And also, when are mitigations required? Are they once the impacts occur, or are they being planned now, and is there a time frame for that? And the other concern that was out there in the public was that while the publication met the requirements of the law under CEQA, the 300 yards or feet or whatever your notification was, and the SAC-B, there was no notification in the Auburn Journal, and the public on a lot of the social media is concerned that this was not in the interests of transparency for the residents of Auburn who will be affected, which may be why you're not seeing a whole lot of folks here today commenting on the project. That would be nice if...
You hear what Mr. Nader said? He said there was an article in the Auburn Journal today.
There was an article, but that's not a public notice. The notice was in the SAC-B only. It would be nice if planning did adopt perhaps an informal policy on these kind of notifications that they publish in the news paper where the project is actually going to occur. But I get that they met the requirements of CEQA. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll wait, and I've written those down, and we'll ask staff to comment on those at the end here. So is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? I do. Yeah, to the EIR. To the EIR.
I need to sign in?
Well, if you want to be, yeah, you should sign that if you and get notification after. But state your name for right now.
My name is Melvin Lee. I'm the, the managing partner right next door to the proposed development. Okay, the reason I'm here is because I own the property since 1965.
And which
okay,
property is that?
1965.
What property is it here?
Right next on the north side. Right next to...
Next to the Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Yeah, right next to Rock Creek Road.
Okay.
Okay, where the 20-unit condo complex, and in front, we have 11.5 acres. Okay, I want to point out, before you approve the development, you need to take care of the drainage problem. Okay, during the storm, okay, the water on the proposed property, it built up, flooding the Rock Creek Road into my property. Okay, so on the condos or townhouses, right next to the creek. Okay, the water is built up. Okay, it's almost to the middle of the driveway now. Okay, so we never had that problem before. This problem arrived on all the development, on the south of us, like Target, Kmart. Okay, all the water is coming down there. So that's why I'm here to
Okay, thank you.
speak up.
So, can I ask you a question, sir?
Mr. Lee?
Mr. Lee, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Now, do you think it's because there's additional water coming off of the parking lot
It
going into
certainly,
the stream?
because like I said, I own the property since 1965. I never have any problem. The creek is, it's floating, even in a real stormy, time, we never have any problem. Okay, I think the PG&E has I guess they have the right way of the creek, if I'm not mistaken. So they normally before, okay, all those, bushes, whatever, growing on each side of the creek, before they came, once in a while they came cleared out. But they have not done that for the last probably 20-some years. So, yeah.
Mr. Lee, would you want to sign in, please, there?
A big pardon?
Sign in the sign-out sheet, and you'll be getting notified when the actual project comes up. Today is the discussion of the adequacy of the draft EIR. And when do you expect the final hearing on that? Just an approximate date for Mr. Lee's benefit and the other people in the audience.
Well, it could happen in, I suppose, as little as a couple months. Depends
Okay, a
on
couple
how
of
long it
months
takes to
then.
wrap up the In fact, I was going to mention that when you were talking about potential.
But he will be,
planning
the
commission
people that signed in today will be notified of that hearing.
hearing. Yes, they will.
Pick it up. Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to comment on this?
Excuse me. Personally, I'm not opposing the development.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Anyone else in the audience wish to comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'll close it to the public, and maybe I'll ask staff to address a couple of questions on Rock Creek Road, the required mitigations when they're required to be mitigated. Of course, the No Auburn Journal thing, maybe you can address that, and then the drainage near his property.
Okay.
The ones
Yeah.
I wrote down anyway.
Sure. I'll start off with Tori's comments. We don't know who the tenants are. When they look at the traffic impacts that could result from a project like this, they take a mix of, the traffic consultants do take a mix of restaurant, retail, clinics, all those sorts of things. Restaurant generates a higher traffic volume, so you would see a little bit more of an increase associated with the typical shopping center in the area. More restaurants, more peak traffic in particular. In terms,
Just as a question, so would that change, since they use this mix to come up with traffic, let's say, it was 10% restaurant. When they actually go to leasing out the units, what if they have 50% restaurant?
That's a very good question, and we don't have a whole lot of control over the number of tenants that come, the type of tenant that comes in and out of leased spaces within shopping centers. There are some shopping centers, Rock Creek Shopping Center, for example, that's south of Bell Road from this project site, where they applied for a variance to parking because they didn't have enough parking to meet the minimum county requirements. So they have a restriction on the number of, the actual square footage of restaurant space within that shopping center. But where projects can provide an increase in parking to meet county minimum standards, the tenant mix can kind of come and go and change over time. So retail uses will require one parking space for every 300 square feet of retail. Restaurants will require one parking space for every 100 square feet of retail. Shopping centers, considering a typical mix of shopping center uses, requires one parking space for every 200 square feet. So it's kind of in the middle. It's intended to be a mix. And for this project, you've got two large tenants on the east part of the property that won't be restaurants. There'll be some kind of box retail. So that accounts for a portion, a greater portion of the square footage that's going to be allotted within the shopping center. So we really do account for a mix. We can't, of course, monitor each business application that comes in for a new restaurant to go into a shopping center, but the accounting within our ordinance in the parking ordinance factors in the ultimate mix of a shopping center.
So if they want to come in under that 200 per square foot for a mixed use or for a mixed area, then they would have to get a parking restriction like you just mentioned for the other development.
That's
like
correct.
You only could put in so many restaurants or whatever
Right.
the restriction might be.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. In terms of when mitigation is implemented, it depends on what the specific mitigation measure is intended to do. Most mitigation will come in prior to improvement plan approval. We'll need to see pre-construction surveys and those sorts of things, wetland delineations, preliminary drainage reports, all those sorts of things need to come in, or the final drainage report, I think, need to come in at that time. Most mitigation, by the time the project's up and running, has already been implemented. In terms of the Auburn Journal, I'll have a discussion with our deputy director about additional noticing in other newspapers.
And I can just add to that. I mean, like it was stated, our legal requirement is, to post in the SAC-B and also the 300-foot radius. But certainly we can consider putting it in the Auburn Journal as well. Placer County is so diverse when projects come in. Some areas don't have local newspapers, and their circulation isn't always on a daily or weekly. So, but in this instance, it would make perfect sense to spread that notice.
I think one final comment from Tori was this feeder road from Dry Creek down to Bell, and this was envisioned years ago in the Auburn-Bowman Community Plan. Actually, Quartz Drive was envisioned at one point to travel all the way north to provide side road access parallel to 49. Don't know where we stand with that. It's a big project with a lot of private property in between, and so this completes one little leg of it, widens one little leg of it, and incrementally we may get there over time. And then to Melvin's comment, it was Melvin, I think. Yep. So the drainage, right now, the culvert that exists beneath Rock Creek Road is undersized. And so if you look at historical photographs, you can see that the wetland area on this project site has actually expanded over time. There's a weir has been created by virtue of that culvert being too small to take in the flows. So you're absolutely right. There is flooding that occurs, topping over. That's what we call it when the water comes up Rock Creek or northward on Rock Creek Road or Rock Creek tributary and then overflows the top of Rock Creek Road. The project would install a series of culverts along the road length that would take all the flows. We spent quite a bit of time analyzing stormwater flows and flood control, and that was one of the areas where this is mitigation. Mitigation to enable construction of that road or reconstruction of that road means you've got to have enough flow going beneath that road to keep it carrying downstream. So if I haven't gotten to your point, I'll be happy to talk more about it, but maybe that helps out.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Wayne?
I just had a question on that, Jerry, because it seems like he was saying that this issue keeps getting worse as developments are
Right.
happening because you're losing permeable surface for that for those to go, that moisture to go away.
That's a good
and
point.
I'm curious, is some of that water from the parking lots ultimately ending up in, whether it's the Kmart Center or whether it's Target, is it ending up in Rock Creek?
Certainly any upstream flows associated with other development, Target, Kmart, those other shopping centers, is flowing right through the large culvert at the north of the project site and flowing into this segment of the stream and then continuing upstream. This project, for its part, has underground detention to be able to slow down those flows so that it kind of releases it in a controlled pattern. So you're not going to see direct results exacerbating the effects from this project. That doesn't mean that this project is going to fix the flows that have historically occurred through this stretch of stream.
So Target and Kmart don't have those retention capabilities?
I can't speak to that. It was before my time. I know it's a pretty big culvert that travels underneath Target. I've seen it. It's a big culvert. But I don't know beyond Target how much impervious surface has been created that flows directly into that versus how much of it is actually detained on those other project sites.
I guess what I'm getting at is it sounds like there's a cumulative effect that's happening here, and this project shouldn't be saddled with trying to fix that problem.
No,
but the county should really try to address that because there is apparently an impact that's impacting his property.
That's a very good point. To the credit of this project, it won't exacerbate the conditions. I'm not quite sure exactly what happens when the culverts are opened up underneath Rock Creek Road, if the flow moves through quicker so that you don't have topping over and then flooding that's a result of the topping over. I don't know if that means, however, that further downstream there's more water going down there that could result in flooding.
Right.
But I think that these issues are discussed in the hydrology report or hydrology chapter of the EIR.
Okay.
So we'll have a response to that in the final EIR.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff? Okay, seeing none, but I'd like to ask the applicant or the EIR consultant if they have anything to add, maybe on this flooding business and the cumulative effect, maybe just that, on that one comment. When I started reading through the report, I picked up there would be two items that would be of real interest. One was, well, they're all of interest, but transportation, of course, is one, and then the stream, and I guess the mitigation below significant, but maybe you might want to just address that briefly, if you could. Just that one item on the hydrology, because I think that's an important issue. I think the traffic issue has kind of been handled. Said it's going to be unavoidable, but
Yeah.
but maybe the other one that says that with our mitigation, it is avoidable. Maybe you might discuss that, how that happens for the members of the public and for us too at the commission level. Your name for the record?
Absolutely. This is Nick Papani with Rainey Planning and Management. We prepared the environmental impact report working directly with the county. So a pleasure to be here, commissioners. So a detailed drainage study was prepared for this proposed project by Morton and Patalo. Okay. They worked closely with staff to evaluate the potential effects of this project on the existing drainage system in the Rock Creek tributary. As was mentioned, there are currently overtopping issues during certain storm events, and so what Morton and Patalo did for the modeling was to look at, by adding the impervious surface associated with this project, how might that existing flood problem be exacerbated? While the project does provide on-site detention through an underground system within the parking lot area of the three retail buildings, or the four retail buildings within the one overall structure there. There's still an increase in impervious, so you have to look at the volume of runoff that could be added to the creek, because ultimately it does make its way into the creek. What was determined was that the culvert needed to be upsized underneath Rock Creek Road in order to facilitate flows through that culvert. That didn't just account for the water from this project, but it accounted for upstream waters as well. So it defined, so as part of the study and what went into the model was they defined a boundary, basically a sub-watershed that funnels waters. So it accounts for Kmart, it accounts for Target, and the waters coming off of those impervious surfaces, funneling those waters through the tributary. So what was identified was mitigation for this particular project, which is within, let me just get to that for the public's reference here. This would be impact 10-5. This is on page 10-27 of the EIR. Under the flooding impact, and there's various exhibits that show the pre-project floodplain and the post-project floodplain, and what's shown is essentially the post-project floodplain would be smaller than the pre-project floodplain on this site. What they also looked at, though, was by upsizing the culvert and facilitating flows through the pipe, would that impact downstream properties? And the analysis determined that it effectively would not impact downstream properties, given the design that's required of this project. And so the design is called out generally within these mitigations. And the detail will have to be worked out on a design level drainage report. So while the detailed drainage report was done for this project as part of the EIR process, the mitigation requires a design level drainage report that'll have to be submitted with improvement plans. So the staff will be involved in reviewing the design level detail, ensuring that the design of the culvert system underneath the road will mitigate the project's impact. So still kept it a bit general there, but
It doesn't appear that there's much difference between the pre and the post on the 100-year floodplain as it relates to Rock Creek Road.
correct, yeah. There's still, under certain storm events, there still will be some overtopping of the road. So it's not going to solve that issue, but the flows that will be overtop, the depth of the flow that will be overtopping, it has been determined to be acceptable. And so the conditions will not be exacerbated from what they currently are, but you're correct that this project will not be fully resolving the issue that exists today under certain storm events. But it will not be exacerbating in any way the conditions that exist, and to some extent it'll be improving the conditions.
So if I'm understanding you correct, the culverts are designed to move the water off of this property faster than what's currently happening. So when you looked at the downstream impacts, was that considered that this water is going to be coming through faster than it was before?
Correct.
And the assumption then is that the creek can handle the speed of the flow and the volume?
Correct, yeah, that's something that the Morton Patala looked at was, okay, if we upsize this pipe, what will that do downstream? And their conclusion through the modeling was that it won't negatively impact downstream properties. So the water's going to flow through the tributary. It's going to go through the pipe. At some point, that is going to build up in a high enough storm event, and there will be then what would be called weir flow, where it would overtop and flow over the road. The road will be designed such that, because the road's going to be improved, it can handle that, and I believe it's within the 6-inch depth in terms of what may be expected. I'd have to verify that or confirm with staff, but in terms of the depth of flow that would be going over the road, but that's determined by the engineering and surveying staff to be acceptable. But again, that's only during certain storm events. The majority of the flow will go through the pipe, but in a high enough storm event, that will build up, and then that weir flow, as we call it, will flow over the road and then back down as it does today.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? We got the consultant at the podium up there. Okay, thank you. Yeah, what you just described is a little bit similar to what they're doing over there at Folsom Dam with the extra spillway. When I read that stuff, I'm an electrical engineer, so the hydrology still kind of baffles me. But they claim that you can release more water out quicker, and you're going to give the people downstream in Sacramento a better flood control. To me, it doesn't make sense. But anyway, that's
right.
That you release more water, and it's not going to be detrimental for people downstream. But again,
Right.
I'm not a hydrologist, so thank you for your explanation.
It's a good parallel.
Jerry,
Just to kind of complete the thought there, that the culvert, the undersized culvert that exists at Rock Creek Road right now, created an artificial condition, so that weir is not something that existed before Rock Creek Road was constructed. The installation of additional culverts beneath the road, in the eyes of the county, is seen to kind of restore the natural flows to some extent, natural flows of the creek.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments from the commission members? Sir, okay. Usually after we close the public hearing, but go ahead, why don't you come up and just make one more comment at the podium, and then we'll kind of close it off and send it back to staff. Mr. Lee.
absolutely, disagree. Okay, if you have bigger cover, okay, that means, you get more rapid flow, okay, because the creek is the boundary is so high, okay, that means you throw more water going through there, okay, gonna make the downstream, more
Flood prone.
yeah, right, exactly. So that's like I said. Okay, like I said, I welcome development. Okay, but this drainage problem has to be resolved. Okay, and I'm here. Okay, I want to make a comment. Okay, if cause my property any problem, if this development, is approved in the future, okay, I will, take legal action on it.
Okay, thank you. I hope that wasn't coming, but it came. Anyway, I think, when we bring it back, I guess for now, we'll just close the public hearing on the draft comments. But I guess when it comes back, you might want to have a little more discussion on the hydrology. I mean, we got it today, but a few more details, not only for Mr. Lee, but for the people downstream. So maybe I'll reread that section too. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item is public work name change, Windflower Place in the Sheridan area. And who's going to be making this presentation?
Rick.
Rick. Okay, there you go. The commercial place. I was trying to find out what we were going to change it to. I lost my place there for a second.
All right. Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Rick Geary with the Engineering and Surveying Division. I'm joined here today with soon-to-be Catherine Imsdahl. She's actually the person in charge of all the addressing and road naming assignments that occur within the unincorporated areas of Placer County. And I have her today just in case there's some technical questions that might arise that I'm unable to address. So the item before you today is a request to rename a road in Sheridan from Windflower Place to Commercial Place. As you can see here from the vicinity map shown in red is Windflower Place, and it is located just south of the intersection of Riosa Road and Sheridan-Lincoln Boulevard. As a bit of history, in 2010, North Dowd and Riosa roads were bifurcated by the construction of the Caltrans Highway 65 bypass project, creating two smaller sections of roads that need to be renamed. In particular, pursuant to our road naming policy, roads within the same area need to have different names to reduce confusion to delivery providers and, more importantly, to emergency responders. Road names were balloted, and Windflower Place and Townview Court were recommended by your commission and ultimately approved by the Board of Supervisors. Fast forwarding to a year ago, actually, in February 2015, a road name change request was submitted to change Windflower Place to Commercial Place. And this is mostly due to the fact of the existing uses out there and the underlying zonings along Windflower Place are industrial commercial. So kind of like Windflower Place didn't quite fit. So upon confirmation that Commercial Place did not conflict with other road names within the area, it was presented to the Sheridan MAC and supported unanimously. In September 2015, after the public outreach was completed by the applicant, we were notified by the Sheridan MAC to go ahead and move forward with the balloting. In October, staff did ballot and subsequently did receive the required 2/3 majority vote to move forward with Commercial Place. Here's an exhibit that actually shows Riosa Road and North Dowd Road prior to the Caltrans Highway 65 bypass project. And as you can see, they're very straight and intersected at this location at 90 degrees. Here is an exhibit of what it looks like today with the Highway 65 bypass project. And as you can see in this location, Riosa Road was bifurcated, leaving this smaller section of Riosa Road, now known as Townview Court, and this section of North Dowd Road was bifurcated at this location, leaving this smaller section of North Dowd Road, now known as Windflower Place, which is the subject of today's presentation. So with that, staff would recommend that your commission recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors of the road name change from Windflower Place to Commercial Place, as well as recommend a finding of exemption pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061B3. And that concludes my presentation, and available to answer any questions you may have.
When you say the balloting, is it property owners that vote on that, is when you say the balloting?
That's correct. The property owners that have legal access to the road are balloted, if they have addresses.
And there's no changes, people that, sometime when these things are done, maybe not on a county road, but in a city, then there's all kinds of changes. People have their addresses changed and everything else, but there was no issues on that regard, or did you have issues, I should say?
In this particular case, the addresses will remain the same, but the road name changes. There are some cases where the addresses change. I mean, the number will change, but in this case, the numbers stay the same, just the road name changes.
Okay, anyone from the commission have a question? Okay, thank you. Is anyone in the audience here to speak to this item? There we go. You write down your name there and.
Lee Bastian with the Sheridan Mac, and we just want to make sure that you recommend approval, because most all the places on that place are commercial, and they said they brought this to the Sheridan Mac when they named it Windflower, but we can find no record of it in our minutes where they brought it to the Mac. They just brought it to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? If not, we'll close the public hearing and ask commissioners, is there a motion or any additional comments or questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if there's, all right, I would like to make a motion that we approve the name change recommended by staff.
Do we have to also include in that it's exempt from CEQA?
And that it is exempt from the CEQA.
I'll second that.
And this goes to the supervisors.
Yes.
So we are just recommending approval.
And moved and seconded that we forward this to the supervisors then. Roll call?
Mr. Arcuri?
Yes?
Mr. Sevison's absent. Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Riccucci?
Yes. Okay, last item 3 is Willow Park Subdivision gated entrance. And evidently, the applicant is requesting a continuance on this, but we'll hear something from staff at this time. Lisa?
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Lisa Carnahan with Planning Services. Yes, the applicant has requested a continuance to the April 14th hearing at 10:05 in order for them to, the Homeowners Association, to solve an internal dispute, shall we say, and come to a resolution on their vote, which was taken for the gate or no gate. So they're planning to return to the MAC on March 9th, and then they would be coming back here April 14th, if that suits the commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Lisa, at this time? Okay, since this was an agendized item, I guess we have to ask the public to speak. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to address this, it's the recommendation has been to continue it to the April 14th to resolve some internal conflicts there. Okay, if not, I'll close the public hearing, and I guess is there a motion that we continue this?
I make the motion that we continue it to April 14th, as requested.
You didn't think you were going to get a second, did you? For a second? A roll call vote?
No, I knew I'd get a second.
Mr. Arcuri?
Yes?
Mr. Sevison's absent. Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Riccucci?
Yes. Okay, that looks like it concludes our meeting for the day. I'd just like to ask one question of staff and maybe legal. On roll call votes, I know when I was involved in the city, we only need a roll call vote on ordinance and resolutions. Does everything, it seems like here we do everything by a roll call vote. Is that the normal procedure then? I didn't want to be extending anything here if I could say yes and no.
It has been the practice of the planning commission. You may notice that at the board, there's often not a roll call.
Okay.
But we've kept it as a practice. It's good for our note keeping, because there were provisions of the Brown Act that require us now to say who voted yea and
List
nay.
the voting.
Yeah, so as a matter of practice,
Okay.
more than anything, we've just kept it as always a roll call.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Okay, if there's no further comment from commission members, EJ, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just a reminder, the next planning commission will be March 24th.
Okay, we got it.
We'll see you in
Thank
a
you.
month.
Meeting's adjourned.